Okay, what is today? December 6th.
Beg your pardon?
Yeah, today's December 6th.
Oh, yeah, it sure is. I've got my hearing aids, but I guess I can get on without it.
This is Joe Todd interview with Zola Faye Sells. Mr. Sells, when were you born?
June 25, 1915.
And where were you born?
North of May, Oklahoma.
Where's May?
Where is May?
Yeah.
Oh, it's in the south part of Harper County.
What's the nearest large town?
It's all right. It's between Slapout and Fort Supply.
Okay, I know where that is then. Okay.
Just about between Slapout and Fort Supply.
Yeah. Who's your father?
His name was Charles Almer, spelled with an A, A-L-M-E-R, Jones.
Where's he from?
Reno County, Kansas.
And who was your mother?
Ida May, M-A-Y, Jackson Jones.
And where is she from?
Well, she traveled around a lot with her parents in covered wagons when she was a girl, but anyway, she was, where was she from when I was born?
No, where was she from originally? Where was she born?
Well, she was born in Kansas, okay. McPherson.
Yeah. When did your parents come to Oklahoma?
My mother came in probably the very early 1900s with her brother. He homesteaded north of May. And she came. He went back wherever their home was, and then when he came back out here, why, she came back to keep house for him. She was just a teenager. And he died. I don't think that she was back here even a year with him until he died with pneumonia. And the neighbors took him in their wagon, and for burial. No one could see the communication was no way she could let her folks know. And she was the only relative, of course, here. And the neighbors, they buried him he's buried in the old cemetery, the old Fort Cemetery at Supply. His gravestone is there.
What's his name?
His name was Jesse. Jesse Taylor Jackson. I never thought that. Now that's on the gravestone anyway. And then she went up to Stalk. There was it's a historical marker there today, Stockholm, which is north of May. And there was the people that ran a store, country store. They had a post office. Mm-hmm. That's where the mail. They brought the mail from Ashland and somewhere else there, and then they would sort it and take it to other places. Mm-hmm. So it was a pretty important post office in that time at Stockholm. And she stayed with these people and helped them there until my father came down. And I don't think, she might have seen my father, but I doubt it, I don't know. But anyway, she had undoubtedly been in Kansas when she was, before that some way, to the state fair at Hutchinson. She had cousins lived at Hutchinson. And some boys had seen these girls, is the way I understand it now. And anyway, my daddy, father, got her address from one of these, a cousin, I think. So he wrote to her back here at Stockholm. He wrote to her, and then he asked if he could come and see her. And so he drove. I don't think they were his. I know they weren't. He borrowed a nice team because Mama said he had a lovely team and horses and a white buggy. And he came in the buggy, and he stayed there a couple of days, and then she went with him, and they went to Woodward and were married.
It was a quick courtship.
Right.
What year were they married?
1907, the year that Oklahoma became a state. Well, they were married in January. I did know the date, but I forgot. About the 20th, I think. They were married in January. I have it at home.
What'd your father do? What was his business?
Well, at that time when they married, he had a homestead out south of about 23 or 4 or 5 miles south of Garden City, Kansas. And then later on they drove. They took a covered wagon and horse and their herd of cattle and went out there from Reno County. See, they went up to his parents' place. But in the meantime, his grandmother lived over by Jed, Oklahoma. She had homesteaded over in there with a couple of her sons. And so my mother and father went to Woodward and got married, as I said. And then they drove this team over by probably near Jet, over in that area.
Yeah.
And visited the grandmother. And
what was her name?
Oh, what's her first name? Metcalf. But I can't think of her first name. There's quite a prominent family up in there. They were. She was living with her two sons, and all three of them had homesteaded, see. We always called her
Now, how did people get a homestead at that time? Was it a lottery?
Well, there were so different ways that they did it. Now, I just don't know how they did that.
Of course, they had the land renovated in 1993.
Now, in our area, like the uncle that went north of May, I suppose that they got a grant or got a permission from the land office somewhere, but they had to live on it so long. And then they proved it up, they called it. I know on our abstracts at home, it would be that way. They had to live out there on it, but how they started to get it, I don't know.
What kind of house did they live in on the homestead? Do you know?
Oh, well, just whatever they could build themselves. A lot of them lived in dugouts in our area.
Do you know if your mother lived in a dugout when she first came out here? Or?
I never did ask her what kind of a house that she and my uncle lived in. I never did ask her, but I would say it was probably a little frame house. Mm-hmm. But I've seen dugouts, where people lived out here, out in there. In fact, there was one near back of where our house where people lived. But I never asked her. I remember her telling about across the road. See, they were quite a ways out. There's big sand hills north of Maeve, and then they were up right in the north part of the sand. And she's telling about the neighbors north of us. Her name was Lathan, said that she got acquainted with, they had a little girl. And she said that they drew their well, they drew the water from a cistern, now I heard that might not have been a cistern there either, because it couldn't have been. They had their water. But she said they opened it up, and then they draw water with a bucket. And so this woman was out there, and the kid was hanging on to her dress tail, and the lady turned around, and the kid went in the well. And my mother said there was a fellow just happened to be going by on his horse, and said, man, he was in there, and he had that rope, and down and went and got that kid right quick. My mother, she never did forget that. Yeah. And then years later, she'd like to have seen those. They moved away. And then when we wrote this history book now that's in Harper County, why I had it, and I noticed there was a Lathan that wrote in there, and I read, and this girl was the girl that had fell in the well. She wrote a deal about her family, and she said that up north of May, when she was little, her mother talked about the only neighbors they had was a man and his sister that came to keep house for him. His name was Jackson. Well, see, that was my mother and her brother. And there it was mentioned in this history book that she had written years later, and the lady was living in Washington that wrote the story. So, you see, and I knew just exactly what she was talking about because I'd heard my mother tell that story so many times. Yeah. So they had lots of things, but my mother, I don't know how old she was, but I know she must have loved to dance, kind of, because she said that they had square dances, and the fiddle was the main.
I was going to ask what kind of recreation they had.
I think that must have been, well, she called it parties, but I think it was little dance parties that they had. Yeah.
What kind of house did your parents live in when you were born in May?
Well, I can tell you, it must have been very small. The house, the foundation, I remember seeing the foundation after I was grown. It was out in the pasture on the highway, on the road north of May on that side, out in the pasture ways. But it couldn't have been over 1 or 2 rooms at the most. But I can remember my mother said that her sister came to stay with her when I was born and said it rained real hard and said the roof leaks. So they just spent all their time with putting pans around under the leaks. And said her sister said, boy, I'd never marry a man that couldn't have a roof over my head.
Now, was your father a farmer?
I wouldn't say that he was. He bought a lot of land, but he never farmed much. My mother said that he was Raleigh. He sold Raleigh products, traveled around, sold Raleigh products
What are Raleigh
for a
products?
while. But now when I can remember him, when I was little, he worked on the railroad, on the Santa Fe Railroad.
What are Raleigh products?
You don't know?
No.
Well, to me that's funny. Oh, I want to go get you some to show you there. It's just like, did you ever hear McNass?
McNass?
Well, years ago, you had peddlers. We called them, they weren't peddlers, but that's what I would call them. They would travel around and they would have in their hack, they had everything you could think of. Some of them would be spices and medicines and extracts. It'd be just different ones. But now Raleigh was one of the main ones. And they carried spices and extracts and medicines, especially mentholatums. And they would always have their name on everything. Liniment was one of the main ones. But they would go to your home, see, and then you'd take your orders. And maybe they would fill them right then. If they didn't, they'd come back and fill them later, bring back the products. But it was, you expected the Raleigh man or the McNass man to come quite often. Well, I never thought of that. That was just common when I was a kid.
Where'd you go to school?
When did I go to school? I started at May. I went there a little while, and I went to Amarillo. And my dad, when he started work at Amarillo, was in 21 or 22, and they had a strike, a railroad strike, and they couldn't get workers, the strikers. And then they were begging for workers, and when the workers did work, they kept the railroad cars right on the track for the men to work, to live, so they wouldn't have to go across picket lines. Now, that was way back there. But those men lived in the railroad cars, and I can remember my daddy took me down there later after the strike was over, but anyway, introduced me to the colored lady that did the cooking, and their dining room, and was a big Pullman car. Just lovely in there where they ate.
And what did your father do for the railroad?
Well, he would probably tell you, I don't know. He worked, would it be a boiler room? Anyway, I know they used steam to clean out things. And I remember he worked in the roundhouse, department in the roundhouse. And I was a little girl one time, and I remember he put me up in the engine with him, and we turned around in that roundhouse on that big engine. I guess I had quite a childhood, and until they'd take that engine into these. Have you ever been in a roundhouse?
I've seen photographs of it.
So you go around, it's just like the engine, and they go around till they push it into, they take that engine, the tracks would go into different chutes where they go to work on. They take that around to go into where you work on the engine, but I can remember.
Steam engine?
I suppose, great big railroad engine. I suppose a steam sure would be, because they burn coal.
Yeah, okay. And you say that your father went to Amarillo when they had a big railroad strike?
It was when they had the strike. There was a railroad strike of workers in Amarillo, and then that's when he got his job. When his first job, he went to work, they were striking, and then they took anybody that would work.
What year was that?
It was either 20 or 21, because I have an old report card, and it's dated 21 at Amarillo. But I can remember I went to school, and my mother put my address where I lived and pinned it to my clothes. So if I got lost coming home, she took me first day. I would show somebody where I lived. Where one day, it took me half a day to get home, but I wouldn't have showed that to anybody for anything in the world. And when I got the railroad track, if I'd have gone the wrong way, it'd been terrible. But I knew when I got the railroad track how to come down the railroad track, because we lived right at the tracks. And I knew when it came to the big viaduct and the tunnel under it and the roundhouse, I knew my way home. It took me quite a while, but I found my way home. But I started school, and I didn't go very long, and they put me back. And I was just in the first grade. But they had A and B, they had classes in it anyway. And they put me in a slow class. But I can remember later what it was, and I was so frustrated. They would see in Oklahoma, we would write the word not like this, N-O-T, and they would do it this way. Have you ever seen that old script where they didn't cross their T's?
Yeah.
And then they would have like right. And I always made my R's this way, and they would make their R's like that.
The R and the T were different then.
And when anything that had a T like that or an R in it, I look at it, I know what it was. I don't know why I was so dumb. And after I got on to just their little ways of doing it then, but I went to 3 different schools the first year, but now I don't remember. I wonder why. I suppose Amarillo was growing so rapidly that we only had a half a day of school, because we'd go early in the morning, and at noon we would go home, and another class, we'd have to take our books and our little papers and things, because other kids would have our desk in the afternoon, and then after so many weeks we'd change, and we'd go in the afternoon, and the other kids would go in. That's the way it was that year. And then we moved a lot. We came back to Maine, and my mother went out, and we lived on a farm. Daddy stayed down there, and Mama, I don't remember what the deal was, but anyway, she went and moved back up on the farm north. I think she had to live on it so much, or be there so much to the time on her homestead rights that she had. She had a homestead.
Homestead your mother had?
But it was a different homestead that she had. I just don't know, so don't put it that way on there. But anyway, we moved back on my mother's farm, north of May. And then my granddad from Kansas, my Grandpa Jones, came. He was always worried that we wouldn't have things that we ought to have. So he would come down when it get cold weather and take us up to his house and keep us. And I'd go to school, country school up there, where I had a lot of cousins. Then we'd come back in the spring, and then they'd go to school there. And just here, and then later on, my father was transferred to Winoka. And then we came to Winoka and went to school there. Everything.
What year did you go to Winoka?
Probably 24. About that area. It wasn't many years. Yeah, I'd say it was in 24. I loved to live there.
Yeah. What kind of games did you play in the 20s as a child?
Everything.
Everything.
I thought afterwards, why kids can't get out and play like we used to.
Well, what did you play?
What was it? Someone mentioned something the other day. Well, all the old games, I could thought of it a while ago, now I can't think of what. We played hopscotch, we wore our shoes out. We played jacks. And I stayed with a lady, he worked at the bank, and he was gone a little bit, so he had me. I was just in the 4th or 5th grade. I stayed with her a few nights, so she wouldn't be by herself. And so came Christmas, and they said, what would you like to have? And I said, a pair of skates. And they got me a pair of roller skates. Now, we didn't have a cement walk by our house, but they were putting in the highway through Winoka. They were paving it. And I can remember that. We couldn't hardly wait till they got that paved so we could get out in the street and skate at night. And they got me my skates, and we wore those skates out. We wore those skates completely out. But when we were little, we used to play hide at winter time. You always had something to do when it was storming. We'd play hide the thimble. If we didn't have a thimble right quick, if we hit something else, just, you know what I mean, don't you?
Oh, yeah. How do you play that, hide the thimble?
We'd take the thimble and hide it somewhere, and then there'd be one person, the rest of them close their eyes or go in the other room, somebody'd hide it, and the rest of them would come in, and then you'd say, well, so-and-so, they'd say, it was cold if you're away from it, and if you got close to it, you was hot. After a while, they'd find it. One time, I remember we used to love to hide it in Mama's ear, stick it in her ear. They'd get around Mother, and they'd look, and she had long hair, and she'd kind of pull it down. But you had to always, you had to have it where it could be seen.
Yeah.
You could never hide it where it couldn't be seen. But I don't know, there was just everything to do. And Mother used to she'd make candy, make taffy. And it was always flavored with Raleigh's extract. And she liked wintergreen. I never did like wintergreen. And I don't know, there was just always something going on. I remember when I was a kid, we stayed up at my Grandpa Jones's in Kansas. He had a beautiful wheat field out back of the house. A bunch of his cousins came, and I don't know whose idea it was, but we just always had ideas. Mm-hmm. We got out there, and we'd lay down. We laid down, and we marked a place, just about what we wanted, and then we laid down, and we rolled and made that wheat in different size rooms, and then we'd roll and make a door, and we made us a house. We had the kitchen, the bedroom. When Granddad discovered what happened, was he upset. The wheat was about that high and headed out, but it was still green. It was pretty. And it just made a mat, see, for you to walk on. We made us we had quite a little deal worked out. My sisters, I can remember, they just played something all the time. And we lived in a place that had the back of the house was up on stilts, about like that. And they got under there and it was sandy. And they actually, it was just cute as could be. They made them corrals. They made their sticks. They got their sticks, and would peel them off and make them look like posts.
Yeah.
And they made corrals. They made, just make play. Yeah. And then everybody had twine string. Used string for their wire. It was just cute as could be. Well, they had a little area covered. Had a place for their house, and they'd make them a house and a cellar out of sand, and then they made their cattle corrals and things. But kids today, I don't know, they don't think about things like that. They buy things. I don't remember. One Christmas I can remember my mother bought material for me, a dress. But as far as buying toys and playthings, we never had those. But we never thought about it. But I can remember when we were on the farm about soda crackers. And they were larger than they have now. They were big, and they would buy them in bulk. In a big sack. But I can remember how we thought those were so they were good because we didn't get them every day,
Okay.
And they used to everybody bought a lot through mail order catalogs. And I was talking to him the other day about it. And they would buy fish, call them salted mackerel. They would come in these the buckets were made out of heavy cardboard. They would come about that thick, round buckets and lids, and you could buy a lot of things. But I can remember a lot of people bought the mackerel. They must have been salted but they were in a liquid like. I remember them taking them out and soaking them overnight in milk, cooking them. They were good. Nobody ever thinks that came from either Sears and Roebuck or Montgomery Ward. It was one of those places you'd get it. I'd like to see one of those catalogs today if they had back then.
In the 20s, did you run the Charleston?
Well, I tried, but I wasn't any good at it. Right. But they had that in the early 30s, too. Because we had it was in 31. 31, we had a school carnival. And that was one of the attractions. We had a boy and girl. You'd pay a dime, you could go watch in Charleston. It's one reason. That was in about 31. She was pretty good, and this boy was too, so that was their deal to make a little money.
When did you get married?
1933. July 10, 1933.
Okay, and just before that, how did the stock market crash and the Depression affect you?
Well, it didn't affect me because I didn't think anything about it. I wasn't where Father does any much, but he was more familiar with it because his father, wheat seed went down, and his father had, he had gone in a little bit on the stock market, but I think it was on wheat, maybe. And I know he lost his money, but I can remember when the banks went broke. Because the bank at May went broke, and I remember my uncle north of May he didn't have much money, but that's where his money was, and that was it. People just lost their money.
How come it didn't affect you or your family?
I don't guess we had any money.
Your father worked for the railroad at that time?
I'm trying to think. Yes.
It'd been 29 and 30.
And 29 and 30. No, I'm trying to think what year he lost. See, it was long about that time, and he lost, he was sent, he was at Winoka, got a long fine while we were there, and then he got laid off. See, after he worked for several years. And when he got laid off, and he got sick. I can remember he got sick. But he was laid off from work anyway, and then they called him back, and he got to work a few months at Wellington, which was another one of their Santa Fe's. He worked there a while, and then he never did get to work anymore. And then he was killed in the early 30s, so...
Where was he killed?
He was killed in Hutchinson, Kansas.
By a train accident?
And But in the 30s, but now, like, my husband was very familiar with those times in there. But I can remember they had a bank at my, later on came back and worked. But I remember when the bank went broke because it affected everybody. People was really hurt. And when then we lived at Maeve, my sisters and mother and I. Mother, her first work, we didn't have any, we just didn't have any money, period. And I remember Mother went down and this old man had a store at May and sold groceries, and he sold us some groceries on time. But Mother would tell us never to buy anything, I mean, if we didn't have to have it.
Right.
And she got it, and then about that time, they started having what they call the NYA.
NRA?
Well, they had so many programs.
And there's WPA and NRA.
When we got married, he worked on WPA. When we got married, I mean, as soon as we got married, he was eligible and he went to work on.
What did he do for WPA?
Where did he work on WPA? The first, they cut trees down along the beach.
What did he do with WPA?
They cut trees down along the Beaver River. He said the man that had the ranch, he would pick out the trees they were to cut. Of course, they were the ones that were old and they wanted out of there, and they'd said just full of knotholes and hard to cut. But anyway, they cut trees, and I think the wood was supposed to be given to the people that couldn't afford, the poor and widows and poor. But my mother,
firewood and all that.
That's right. It was cut for firewood, yes.
So they cut firewood. There was just to cut firewood. What it was for?
Well, the government, WPA workers, got money for their work, see. But the wood then was supposed to be given to people who needed it. I don't remember who got it, but I know it was to be cut for firewood for the needy. But my mother was one of the first ones that went to work. They had a sewing. They employed people in the sewing rooms. That's something I never even thought about for so long.
What you do in the sewing rooms?
Well, the people that needed work, women. It was women that needed work, for their families. I don't know who was the head of it. The lady at Buffalo, of course, was the head of it. It probably went through the county commissioners, I think. Anyway, you go and apply for work, and they would, they just sewed. They'd give you material. You could sew for your family. You could make, but a lot of it, they made quilts. What they did with all the materials, I don't know. But Mother, she was a good seamstress. Like we called it the sewing room over there south of this highway. But I'm sure they had them all over. Because that was just in our little town of May, so they had them in every town. Now it might have been a form of WPA.
It could
but
be.
It was for women, see, the women part of it. I never thought about it. I could ask.
There was a lady showed me a WPA doll that was made.
Doll?
Yeah.
I don't know what they had made dolls. Maybe they had a place where they made dolls. What would WPA have to do with it? I don't think so. Of course, now in our community, that was about all that the women could do would be to sew. And I know they did make lots of comforts. They made tack comforters and made quilts if you needed them. Well, they furnished the material and you made them. And my mother sewed for we girls. She always made all of our clothes. And I'm sure, I don't know what they did with the surplus, but I know they did made lots of clothing over there. It was just in a person's home or house, and then they met over there and sewed. But she got money for it from them, but I don't know how much. I can't remember. And then he didn't work very long my husband didn't, at chopping wood, and then he got a job working for a farmer up north of May and driving a Caterpillar tractor for 10 cents an hour at night. And he wanted to make a little more money, so he agreed to drive it 16 hours to make $1.60. And that was pretty rough, really. But I can tell you what I did with the first money I got. Some of the first money, we ordered out of the catalog, and they had a lot of items. We ordered a quilt, and I ordered my first pair of scissors, and I ordered a tin box to keep things in. But, you know, everything was $1 in the catalog, and there's my scissors. I've had those all these years.
Stay sharp.
They were either Sears, and they're from Sears or Montgomery Ward. I don't know which.
Mm-hmm.
Those are old.
Before you were married, in the late 20s, early 30s, can you tell me just what your average day was like? What time you'd get up? What kind of meals you'd fix?
I don't like to, because that's good. When the other kids, I was older of the three, and the other three made so much noise I couldn't sleep or something. We just had 2 rooms, and they'd drag me out of bed or something, you know. They didn't. I was older, but they get up early to play. I can remember playing. There's another thing about playing. Mother had a treadle sewing machine, and years ago we used to get they'd have a roll of paper, the wallpaper, and once in a while somebody had a roll they'd give us or something. Mom would always put it on the shelves. But we took the paper and we would cut little strips, and then we'd roll it all up, and then we would play we'd have rolls all fixed in a box. We played store, and we'd take that and measure it out we made our own measuring stick, you know. We measured out like we selling material. Like in a dry goods store, we did everything. You know what I mean? And people would come to the store and they'd measure out so many yards, and we'd clip it off and we'd take it just to play. We played everything. Yes, you could say we did.
What did your average meal consist of at that time? For breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Well, different years, different things. When we lived at Winoka, we ate a lot better than we did anywhere else because we could always run downtown. Mother, gravy. Mama used to cook liver. You could buy liver at the butcher shop. You'd go down and buy it, but you could buy that cheaper than you could anything else, and it was good for us. And liver gravy is always good. But I think everybody ate a lot of gravy, and most generally biscuits. Never a piece of bottom bread. You just didn't have bottom bread. They made biscuits a lot and always baked on bread, very big loaves of bread.
Now, just in the 20s?
All through the 20, all the time I was growing up, we'd eat lots. And eggs. You always had your own eggs. But bread and gravy was one of the main things. And I can remember my mother cooked rice a lot. We'd have rice for breakfast. Creamed rice. Lots of times. But people ate different than they do now, though. So different. I can remember my first Jello. The first pan of Jello. I thought that was then tasted. I thought that was the best thing and prettiest dish I ever saw. I was about grown then. But it was localities you were in had a lot to do with it. Now we go up to Kansas to my grandmother Jones's, and she liked to cook and she read and she tried new recipes. But we'd come back to Oklahoma. In this part out there, where was my other grandparents, and they cooked completely different. Theirs was just more or less the staples of the day, and if you had cake, they'd stir up a cake for Sunday dinner or something like that. But my grandmother in Kansas, she would have, if she cooked plenty of potatoes, she'd have enough to make a potato salad. The next day she made salads and things. Where down here we didn't have a lot of that. It was more or less just plain cooking. But it always tasted good.
And what was your main source of meat?
Pork.
Chicken. Did you raise hogs?
Oh, you mean after we were married?
No, it's the same period. Did you have any farm animals at all?
Yes, we always said. We didn't when we lived at Winoka because we couldn't in the house, but when we lived at May, we always would have a hog because you could feed out a hog. We always had a hog where you could feed it out and you could give You'd mix up some mash in the dish. We'd always save the dishwater. That sounds funny, doesn't it? We always save the dishwater, and you could mix up some mash in the slop bucket. Everybody had a slop bucket. A swill pail. A lot of people call it swill pail. And Ed's folks raised, his dad raised registered cattle, hogs and cattle. Well, you're not asking about him, though. His life is completely different than mine, really.
Mm-hmm. Did you butcher your own hogs, or?
Right.
Did you help do that?
Make your own sausage and grind it and fry it down in patties and sometimes in crocks or in fruit jars. And you fry that sausage down, fry it, and then you put it in your fruit jar. And then you get it full, and you turn your fruit jar up over. Well, we'd put a pan or something with a knife or something to get air, turn the fruit jar up over it like this where it could drain the water. There might be a little water in there, just a drop or two, drained out, and then when it was everything was hot, real hot, and you turn that jar up and you pour a little wheel. You have some fresh lard that would be in a little pan that was going to get real hot. Then you pour maybe a half a cup of that hot lard down over the sausage, seal it up and turn it upside down and keep it for years. Good. Of course, when you turned it upside down, when it got cold, that lard was at the top, sealing it. We usually would turn them up. And that's why we put it in fruit jars. And then sometimes people would fry it and put it down in fresh lard, pour it over it in crockery. If you had a big family where a lot of people eat, take it out. But it was good sausage, I'll tell you.
So you butchered your own hogs then?
Oh, yes. I rendered lard in a big iron kettle lots of times.
How do you render lard?
Render lard? Oh, yeah, you cut all your fat off your hog. You can cut it. We'd always cut it in small chunks, just in little cubes, or cut it up in little pieces. And you put it in your we had a big iron pot out in the yard. Mm-hmm. And you put it in that, and you want to put a little tiny bit of water in it when you start it, just a little bit of water in it, and he had always fixed us a big axe handle. Kept that clean to use to stir it with, and just keep stirring it. Start it slow so you won't burn anything, and then just keep it getting it hot. And after a while, after so long a time, it'll turn to the cracklings will come to the top. You've got pure lard and not much cracklings. Then we've got our old I've got my things still at home. Our old lard press, and you pour that in the lard press. You see, and then you come down with the press on the cracklings. When you get through, your lard comes out the bottom. Of course, you didn't always have to have it that way, but that was the handiest. And we put it in 5-gallon or 3-gallon, 5-gallon crocks, your lard. Mm-hmm. And the cracklings will come pressed until there just wouldn't be many of those. They'd be solid. Of course, I like to take salt and put on a little bit of those and eat them, but we'd have them clamp down. They'd be so hard you can hardly separate them.
What'd you make your sausage out of?
Oh, my mother, she just made out of anything, but Ed's folks always they would use the shoulder meat. Usually, we didn't use the ham much because we'd cure the ham. But use your shoulder meat, all your little spare parts off of the neck and head and everything. And then we'd save the tenderloin because it was too good to put in this. Not always, sometimes we put some in the sausage. The shoulder just gets you a lot of meat, and so much fat and so much lean, mostly lean, you see, and grind it together. Season with a lot of salt and pepper. We didn't put sage in it to can it, because if you put sage in it, it would get old quicker.
It would?
It didn't keep good.
Mm-hmm.
But for the fresh sausage, I like sage in it.
You make head cheese?
Oh, yes.
How do you make that?
Well, we'd boil the head, take the head, and take the cleaver and chop down through it, the bones, and put it on and boil it. Might have a little piece of meat, the tongue, the ears, tongue especially, of course your head, and boil it and get all the little pieces of meat. After it's cooked, and you can season it any way you want to, and it naturally makes a gel itself. The ears make, how could you call it? Anyway, it's good. You put your seasoning in it, salt and pepper.
So it's mainly made out of the head?
Yes.
That's what's called head cheese, I guess.
Right, I suppose. And then we'd cook it, cook all the meat off, and you drain the water off. I mean, we didn't have the juice on it, and you take your head cheese and we put it down in a crock and press it. press it in there until you could just, and then it forms a jelly, and you can cut it like lunch meat, you know what I mean? Put it in little crocks where you could just pour it out like that, and it'd just be a chunk of head cheese. Never thought about it. I bet it's good.
Mm-hmm.
And you could, now we used to put a little bit of liver, or heart with it, grind that and put it in. But now real head cheese was mostly head. It has a different flavor. Liverwurst, I guess, kind of like we'd put make some of that too. But your head cheese is good. I haven't thought of that for years. They're starving me to death.
Oh. Now, what did your husband do mainly?
What did he do?
Yeah.
After we married, we've always farmed.
Always farmers.
And raised cattle.
So then, after you married, did the Depression affect you much after you married?
Oh, I'd imagine we was poor as church mice. Well, what affected us was the Depression plus the dirt storm. The dirt storm was caused by drought, actually. The drought and the Depression hitting at one time. That's what hurt. If you'd raise a bushel of something, you couldn't get anything for it. I remember his dad, that's what hurt him when, he had a lot of wheat there, and 25 cents a bushel is what he got for it during, And we finally, if you'd raise anything, about the only way you could come out would be to feed it to livestock. You couldn't sell it and get enough money for it. And then livestock finally got so it wasn't worth anything either. Nothing was worth anything. Like I said, when Mary Lou was born, the bill was $28 at the hospital, and it took four big fat steers to pay for the bill. So you just couldn't. Then after things got better, that would have been in about 38, things started getting a little better, and we borrowed $200 at the bank, and it took some doing to get it, I'll tell you. Most of the bankers wouldn't loan it. He finally talked this banker into it, borrowed $200, and he went to Woodward. He stayed up there at the sale about all night trying to pick out what he wanted, and he brought home 8 heifers, $25 a piece. But we didn't have grass to keep them. We had borrowed the money to make down payment on 160 acres of land. $900, but we had to borrow the down payment for that. But he bought these heifers, and so then he found him a neighbor man that had the grass, but he didn't have anything to put on it and couldn't borrow any money at all. But he had a pretty good sized family. His credit was completely gone. And so he agreed to keep the heifers, and if they made anything, we was to split the difference. But it was our place to pay the interest. We were the ones that was out the money. But things started coming back pretty fast. Really, it'd been years and years the same way, but when it did come back, it came back pretty
What made it come back,
Really, I don't know. Unless there got to be a shortage of cattle, in a way, because, see, the government had come in before that, and when people like this man that used to have credit, he used to have cattle. Well, when he got the place, his credit wasn't any good, and he didn't have any cattle. He didn't have any. He didn't have anything. He had the grass down there. The place he was living on didn't even belong to him, but he had grass. And I can remember those heifers, we sold them for $50 a piece just before they had calves. And then he goes back and borrows some money and tried. That's how the first cattle we had, that's the way we did it. Mm-hmm.
Do you know of how many people around where you live went to California in the Dust Bowl?
Well, just right in our immediate area. Well, I'd hate to say several, but you'd have to know how many people lived in our area to know how it compared to you.
Can you describe?
About every third or fourth house in the area, somebody had gone to California. Some of them, maybe more than that.
Did you all ever consider going?
I didn't consider going to California. I just wanted to go move to town. We were way out in the country. And, of course, we didn't have any electricity. We didn't have a car at the time or anything. And I just wanted to get out and do something better.
Yeah.
But he was working every day. He was farming with horses. And he was farming with his dad's horses. We were living on his dad's place. at that time. And but the neighbors, there's another thing. Neighbors were always so good to us. Neighbors worked together so well. And then when the war broke out and our neighbors, the closest neighbors that we knew the kids, 5 of those boys went to the Army. And I said one of the most precious times was when one of those boys came back. He had been in the Baton March.
The Death March.
And he had stayed with us, and I knew him real well. But anyway, I was over at their home the day that he came back after the war. And I remember him stepping up. The dirt had blown away from the step there, but I remember him stepping up on that old back step. And the tears rolled down his cheeks, and he said, I never expected to ever step my foot here again. He said, anyway, he was so happy. And I can remember he looked so terrible. His feet, at the time, he had on house shoes. And because he had been in the Japanese coal mines when they had to drop the atomic bomb, that's where he was at, was in the coal mines over there working. And his feet had this coal up in his feet, and they were black. They were that way a long time. I don't know whether they ever did get rid of all that or not.
Was he near where they dropped the bomb? Was he near where they dropped the bomb?
Yes, he was close, but he was in this coal mine at the time. Hiroshima?
Hiroshima.
Well, anyway, at one of those. He was in the coal mine, right in that area, yes. He's not well today, but he's still living, yes. Very interesting person.
What's his name?
Leonard Hart. And he was, a few years ago, they put him as postmaster at Laverne, but I think he's resigned now. Very nice person to talk to.
Can you describe the dust storm?
Well, they're just to tell to us. It was just every day. They were just all dust storms until we had a few that were worse than others. You'd remember, but every day you would have dust until. And then I remember maybe the next year would start a little earlier. Usually you didn't have until the real. I remember the first one was kind of March, and then it got so after the years went by, they would start a little earlier, maybe in February, maybe in January. They'd start a little earlier each year. That was that.
How many years did the dust storms last?
Well, the first dust really kept after when we were in high school down in May, and that was in the early 30s. Now this one we had them, it was in the early 30s. Then when after I was married, and we lived out there on the farm in 36, it was terrible. 34 was when we had the big one. They call it the black duster now, but to me, it was just another, only it was worse than anything we'd had. And
how long did that one last?
Well, it started when it blew. It was such a beautiful, just like this one. It was a beautiful, beautiful day, and all at once, just like the sky, here it came, just like that, hit kabang, just ooh. And it was about must have been about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, because these kids, this boy that I mentioned, the Hart boy, his sister had been to my house to play with the baby, and her friend. And then people walked, the neighbors sometimes, and had been up to Hart's even. He'd been up there, and he just got back in, and I said, well, hope the girls got home before this hit. Because, man, you couldn't see anything. And then, it wasn't very long, though, after it hit. The wind just howled with it. See, we didn't have any wind when it hit. It was just wind and dirt all at once. And I don't know why that would have been, but that's the way it was. And you go out to turn the windmill off. That was what's funny. When they'd have... the air was so full of electricity. You go out to turn the windmill off, and it just always scared me, because about the time you get up there to turn it off, that sparks would just fly. But the wind didn't start, and the dirt didn't start blowing very long until it was black. I don't know where the dirt came from, but across our area, and we had a field of black soil out by us, but I've always heard that it came in black anyway from way out. But it wasn't long until that dirt turned red. I mean, the sky. And you could look outside, and it was getting redder and redder. But the wind blew and the dirt blew all night. I'm pretty sure of that, but now I can't remember. Probably the next morning it was clear again, because that's the way everything happened. We'd have a terrible time, and all at once, when the wind quit, why it'd be I know it had changed before dark. It changed color and everything before dark.
How'd you keep the dust out of the house?
Beg your pardon?
How'd you keep the dust out of the house?
You didn't.
Did you try or just let it come in?
Well, if you stick tape or something along the windows, well, shoot, it wouldn't be long. It was so fine. It was just fine as silk. And there wasn't anybody that had a house tight enough to keep the dirt out in your attic, especially your shingles. It just came under the shingles. It was everywhere. And then after you had it day after day, I can remember this one lady down in May, she said, shoot, I just open the doors, it comes in one direction one day, and then the next day it blows it out, comes in the other. That's just about the way it did. You'd have it from the south maybe, and then the next day it come from the other. It didn't matter. You had it from every direction. If the wind blew, you had dirt.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could, you can't imagine what the country looked like. Been there and out in southwest Colorado and all down through Oklahoma. It would just be waves of silk, just like you'd see pictures of ocean waves, only with just silk. And that's fine stuff. You get on it must have had it was hard on your hands, very hard on your skin or hands. You'd clean it up and your hands would be sore, if you used soap and water to clean it up, to wash. But nobody had, I can't remember anybody hardly having a rug in a house or carpeting. Now, there's a lady right here in town, over here a little ways, and they were school teachers at our school. He was principal, and after I talked to you that day, called her and talked to her, and I said, I just happened to think of you. I was reminded of things back in the 30s, and I had thought of you and thought I'd call you. And she said, oh my, I said, he was talking about dirt storm days, and she laughed, and she said, oh yes, don't you remember? It didn't matter what color the linoleum was, because you never could see the print in it anyway. Just dirt.
What's their names?
Rank, very nice people.
What's his first name?
William A. Rank. He lives over here I have the address somewhere, but you can find that in the paper. Now, if you want somebody interesting to talk to Bill. But he's probably 90 years old, and he was up in there before I was. And his wife is a real nice person too. They're both living over here. But the last time I saw Bill to visit with him, he was going blind. But you know what that man was doing? He was trying to get so he could pass the bar examination. He's had that ambition. He always wanted to do that. And he's an old retired Army fellow that he was in the cavalry. He worked with cavalry. Mm-hmm. But now when I knew him, he was the girls' basketball coach at May and superintendent of the May school.
I'll give him a call. I'll give him a call. I'd like to talk to him.
If he's able to visit with you, you'll not visit with any nicer person.
Good.
And he's an old-timer from out in our area. He still has his ranch at Gage. He still has a ranch at Gage.
They live in Oklahoma City?
He lives in Oklahoma City, just about 3 blocks from here, she told me.
Okay.
And Billy. But now he has written a few little pamphlets on horses, and he sent me one not too long ago before we came down here. He came to see us up there at Shadow. He doesn't drive a car anymore. Yes, that person right there, him and her are very interesting. But
to go back, I'm sorry.
They were living there at May when I was in high school. Only they were our teachers there at May.
What was the town of May like when you were living there as a child?
I want to go show you things, and I can't because I don't have them here. When I was a child, the little town of May was a pretty good-sized town. They had the bank, and it was nicer than that before, because I heard Mother tell about it. But when I can go back and remember, we had the butcher shop, had barber shops, they had a hotel, 2 hotels, lumber yard, post office, grocery stores, 2 or 3 grocery stores.
How many people live in the town?
I don't have any idea, but yeah, it was it was a pretty good sized town. In 1915 and 12, about 1912, May was I would say bigger than Laverne, and now it's nothing much. It's bigger than Slap Out. But I have. If you get a chance to look at a Harper County history book. That's my picture in there somewhere of the town of May in 1912.
Okay,
It's on the hardback, on the inside of the hardback.
Did you do any work for the war effort in World War II?
I was too little.
No, World War II.
World War II. See, I'm going to be World War II. What all did
In the
we
40s,
do?
you know, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and all that.
Well, I know we were sure upset about everything, and we just did all we could to raise everything we could, and milked a lot of cows by hand. But of course, we was doing that to make our own living too. But his brother, I can remember the day of Pearl Harbor mighty well. There's another thing. We had just bought some, I had to sell, my mother gave me a calf. She always had a milk cow to milk. Always milked the cow. And when I got married, she gave me a calf. And then it was a little calf, and my father-in-law then traded me a heifer for that. And then I had the heifer, and she had a calf. And I wanted to buy some things from these people. This woman was going to go to California. The family was going to California. He had already gone, and she wanted to go, and she needed money. I told you, for gas. So she said, Faye, you always wanted a sewing machine. She said, I'll sell you my sewing machine, and they had a Zenith radio, the used battery, the big, you could use it on a car battery, and a little table. And anyway, I said I'd buy it, but didn't have any money. So Ed helped me, and he loaded up, got the neighbor in his old pickup or trailer, I don't remember which it was now, and we went up, and I had a heifer that had just had a baby calf. And so he took the heifer, my baby calf, to town, and she brought the calf and the heifer, and that's when things were starting to get a little better, a nice Hereford. And they brought $49. I remember that so well. And anyway, I bought this lady's, we took it and had to go right quick because she was wanting the money right now. She wanted to leave. And I bought the sewing machine, the treadle sewing machine, and the radio. And then I had money left. But that radio, we used that, and the neighbors would come. We had one neighbor, the lady, when they found out that they had radio, and they came and they stayed all night. I can never will forget. And we just had 2 rooms. This man and his wife and all the kids came, and they sat right up around the radio. And finally, I went to bed. I couldn't step in, but my kids to bed, and their kids was all asleep. That man and woman sat there all night listening to that radio.
What year was that?
Man, that wasn't that. They should have had one or something themselves. That was in about 1939.
That's radio?
But I'd always been around the radio because my grandparents had one. My uncle built one, built grandparents one. But people out in our area didn't have one because we didn't have electricity, as I say, and everything had to be off of a wind charger. I mean, that's something else you don't see anymore. A lot of people had the wind charger. But most people could do some things themselves. And ours, we just would, when we had the radio, at first one, we'd drive the car up and and play the radio on, drive the car up to the window and get the battery out of it. But then we bought us a new battery for the radio and had this radio. But I can remember it was on Sunday. He was over at his folks, and his brother had joined the 45th Division. He was one of the original 45th boys, Thunderbirds, and he was home on furlough. I mean, he'd come home that weekend, and I was the radio, and announced about Pearl Harbor. It was on Sunday, and I remember, how shook I was, can hardly wait. And when my husband came home, he lived about 10 miles from his folks, he and a little boy, and when they got home, I said, what did Vernon do when he got the news? Said, well, as soon as he heard the news, said he was up and on his way back to camp, that quick.
What tomorrow is, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
What tomorrow is, don't you? You know what tomorrow is?
7th.
December 7th.
Right. I certainly did. And then, like I said, it affected our community because there were a lot of boys. Oh, there's something I can tell you real interesting.
Okay.
Well, we got this one place, we farmed quite a bit because his dad had land and he was trying to hang on to it, but he couldn't get anybody to farm it. Nobody could farm it. And then he had lots of horses, and he would let people keep his horses and let them work them just to keep them for him because he didn't have a feed. And so anyway, then the worst ones, so they would always come and take his good ones, and the worst ones, my husband was left to work. Dad always let us have the better worst. And we raised a nice, we had over there on the Shirley place, we had a quarter of land covered with spring crop. The wheat had blown out in the spring. The wheat just blew out. So we planted spring crop. And we had feed that looked like it was going to make real good. And all at once, the drought hit again, you know. It just hit up there to be headed out. And it started drying up. Well, it started falling over. So we wondered what we could do for feed. It wasn't worth getting somebody to come in and cut it, because it just didn't have the money to do that. So the community was just full of young boys. And he let the word out that any boy wanted to cut fodder with a corn knife, bring their corn knife, and we'd furnish their dinner, and 50 cents a day. Well, the first day, there were several boys, neighbor boys, that came, and I can remember I didn't know how to cook very well, and I had an awful time cooking food for them. But by the second day, I think we had 17 boys. Now, I better not say 17, but we had a lot of them. Quite a few of them came. And then they would go down the row. They would go down the row with a corn knife and cut a handful, and they'd lay it over, lay it over. And then later on that evening, he would go along with the wagon and gather up, get a couple of boys to help him gather up. But it wasn't long after that, these boys were the same boys that went off to be in the CC camps. Now, you know what that was. Yeah. But that was just prior.
Civilian Conservation Corps?
Conservation Corps, I'm sure it was. And they did a good job, because those boys, like I said, they were needing something, they were eager to do something.
What did they do around there in the Conservation Corps?
Well, the ones in our area, we had a CC camp. They had to. Or some of that.
Now, what's a WPA toilet?
Well, I've seen the time that the people just didn't have, a lot of people didn't have toilets. And the WPA, I don't know if there's any up May left or not. They just built.
But it's just a privy, what it was?
Right. But the WPA toilet, they finally came out and they built a platform, a cement platform with the stools, you call it, to come up. Yeah. It was built of cement too. And then they would have they had a wooden lid you could cover it up with. And then it wasn't long till about everybody in the country, everybody wanted one. Mm-hmm. Everybody had a WPA toilet then. Now even people in the country, see anywhere, you dig you a hole and put one there. But that was more or less the floor and the throne, as we used to call it. But then, like I said, these boys, though, they came to help us. They went to the CC camp, a lot of them. And then it wasn't long till they were in the war. So. But they were all that I ever knew at that time were wonderful kids. I don't know if any of them getting it, but I mean, just like when they had word out that they could make 50 cents a day in their dinner, or they showed up, a lot of them just walked, over to our place. But there were a lot of people lived in there at that time, but they soon were leaving, see.
Mm-hmm. What other WPA projects went on around that area?
The WPA?
Yeah, or the CC, either one.
The CC now was a different deal. The one at Woodward, they built Boiling Springs up. You know what I mean? That Boiling Springs Park up there by Woodward, it's a nice park today, but they built the swimming pool there. They built if you ever go up there, you want to look. They built these stones They did a lot of masonry work with stones and things like that. They built
How did you qualify for CC or WPA?
Anybody, I suppose. I imagine they had an age on there that you had to be a certain age and so much, but I know the boys, all of them around home that wanted to go, went. I mean, went to a CC camp and helped out.
Were you living out there when the big tornado hit Woodward?
Yes,
1947?
I was. Yes, I was. I wasn't in it, but I sure saw the sky that night, that evening.
What was it like?
It was, about 6 o'clock in the evening, I guess, or later, we took the kids to Laverne to the skating rink. It was a community project. And I remember some of them came out, they said, it was such an eerie feeling. It was, the air was so humid or something. It was just, it was hard to breathe, put it that way. And we were north, and off to the south, all through there. It started in this way and came around, but the sky was the oddest color. It was in the evening and the night, but that sky was a red. It was a very odd color. And of course, and then the next morning, early, here came the man over to bring his kids to our place to catch the school bus, and he said, he got on his little radio that Woodward blew away last night. That's the first I knew what happened. Well, it started and came clear around as it came through Texas and south of Shattuck. Shattuck's hospital was filled. I know a lot of people that were in it. In fact, one of my friends has her plate in her head I visited with just recently before I came down here. She lost her children, but she survived it. And it was through the van. I went through Woodward, and it was the next day, or that day, I helped a lady helped her can meat and wash and things. And then I think it was the next day we were supposed to go to Woodward. So anyway, we went to Woodward. And, you can't describe it today because the highway is so different. But as we went to Woodward, we used to have to go up a hill like this. And on the south side was nothing but high line poles. Well, that day when we went up there, they were just one tangled mess. And then the house that used to sit here was gone. You got up there, well, it was just like pictures. Everything was just smashed in the west part of Woodward. There weren't any nice, in the west part of Woodward at that time was more or less a shanty town in the first place. I mean, nothing was built very good. Even the restaurants and things out that way were just wooden. And today, now, we have some nice buildings that took the place of them, but it sure was a terrible.
How much did the town just tear up?
Well, the whole west side was torn up, and the post office was way downtown, and it damaged it. I don't know, I'd be afraid to say. But I know it was a terrible time. And then there were several days, some of the people they never did find. There were 2 or 3 people they never did get identification of, children.
How many people were killed in that tornado?
It was at Woodward?
Yeah.
Just at Woodward alone was over 100. Now there is an issue, Reader's Digest carries that. It has the write-up on that and all the statistics. When was that? It was written in 40. Anyway, a few years back, they had a Digest carries about the statistics and everything. But what bothered me that time, the town, we think of the town being torn up, but it came down through Glacier, Texas, down in there, and took out a lot, but it came through the country down there. And so many people were hurt in the country.
How big was the funnel cloud?
Beg your pardon?
How big was the funnnel cloud?
I wouldn't have any idea. Because, I don't know whether anybody ever saw the thing or not. It was dark. But then the sky, it was night, but still the sky, I suppose there was so much electricity. I'm sure it was. Because the sky was completely red. All in that area. And you knew something was going on because it was the stillness of it. And we were about 40 miles. Maybe further than that. Probably close to 60. But still, you could feel something. You knew something was going on. But didn't realize it was as serious as it was.
How long was the tornado on the ground? Where did it start?
I don't know what time it started over there, but Texas, but it was probably, I just don't know. But I do know it was evening time.
Mm-hmm. It was on the ground quite a ways, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, because Lipscomb, it started on this side of Pampa, Golly, he must have traveled 80 miles. This was way off, and then it came south of Shattuck. And yeah, it was terrible. There's still a lot of. I can remember going to Arnett. We had to go to Arnett for something later on, and this. You could see a tank or anything just wrapped around a post. If there was a post left standing, might have something wrapped clear around. You just couldn't leave. What could happen? Something metal, that wouldn't even think of being bent. I can remember a lot of the neighbors one of our closest neighbors, the ranchers over there, their daughter was working. A lot of kids would go to Woodward to work, after they got out of school. She was working for a dentist up there, and I know her folks wanted to get up there and to see how she was, and you couldn't get into town. All communication was out, We didn't have any relatives right in town, so I felt like that we didn't have any business up there, because when something like that comes, we didn't stay, but we just got up there and then left in just a little bit, because there's too many people too interested that really needed to find out. But I saw the effects of it, and of course, and then later on you visit Woodward, they're just a matter of fact. That was our biggest town. Yeah.
How many kids do you have?
Do I have?
Yeah.
We have 3.
3? How many grandkids?
6.
6.
Our kids went to a country school. There was a consolidated. If I have my history book here, I have a picture in front of this Mr. Rank that I mentioned. I think he taught at Luther Hill Country School. It was a consolidated school in northern Ellis County, south of May, but it's still in Ellis County, and that's not in a good community out there. The land is not too good. It's rough area, but they needed the kids for school, and so in order to have a good school, I don't know how come, but that was before we went there. They voted and they consolidated. And when that school first started, I visited with a lady. She passed away recently. But she told me in 1919, it must have been when they started the school, because she said, I drove. You think about it, she said, being a school bus, but she said at that time we had 3 wagons, and she drove one of the wagons from her side to deliver children to this school. And they finally later on built a big brick building, but there were a lot. There must have been somebody on every 160 that had a dozen kids, because the school, I have a picture of it at home, and there were a lot of kids that went to school there, all the way from little ones clear up to look like bearded men.
What was the name of the school?
Luther Hill.
Luther Hill. And
I often wondered where they got the name. And later on, an old lady told me that one of the neighbor ladies, that they got the name. That was the first boy in their neighborhood that got killed in World War I. His name was Luther Hill, and then I knew where Hills lived. You see, down there on the creek. But that's where the school got its name. See, that was 1919 when they had the school, and that was during the World War I, wasn't it? Right.
Yeah, right after the war.
Right, and then they named this school Luther Hill, and that school then when we moved over there in the early 30s, they had the big brick building built, and they had high school there. They had the 8th grade, and we had 2 or 3 teacher each houses on the ground, and a janitor house. The old fellow was a janitor. And today there's nothing.
Luther Hill's gone now?
Beg pardon?
There's no more Luther Hill School?
No. They consolidated. Our children went to school there, the first, till they graduated from the 8th grade. But when they first started the school, they still had a high school there. But during that 8 years that they were growing up there, the high school was disbanded, and the high schoolers had to go other places. And then by the time they were out, the whole school went out, and the schools, some of the children that went to school there go to Shattuck, some go to Gage, some go to Laverne, some to May. It was disbanded whichever direction. But that's how things have changed in that length of time.
Well, I think we have a good interview.
We had They'd always have last day of school dinners, and I can remember so well this lady, and I thought, how can she bring food? She had a big family. It's the one that I was telling you about, drove the school wagon years ago. She had about 8 children. Every one of those children have a pretty good education and amounted to something too. But I can remember her coming to the school dinner, and they didn't have anything. But I can remember what she brought. She had, in salmon, is something that people used to buy lots of cans of salmon because they could buy it cheaper than anything else. But she made a very big pan of salmon patties. I mean, a big platter full. She made out of salmon. And you always put a lot of crackers, and eggs for filling. You make it go quite a ways. And I can remember she stirred up a big cake, but she brought a lot of food. She just had a lot of everything. And then I remember, we'll go back to the Raleigh days, and they had all the strong extracts. I remember this one lady, she put, her cake wasn't good. Everybody tasted it, and I thought, what in the world? I found out later she put anapain oil. She got the anapain oil for her lemon extract. It tasted terrible.
Anapain.
Did you ever hear of anapain oil?
No, what is it?
Well, that was a standby. Everybody had anapain oil, and McNess made, but Raleigh anapain oil was something that was in a bottle, and it was clear. Well, you just used it for everything. Mm-hmm. It was a liquid, white liquid. You used it for toothache. You used it to put on a swollen toe. You used it for everything.
It's sold by Raleigh? Or McNess?
Oh, what did they have? I keep thinking I'm home. Sometimes could show you things. Yeah, I've got some old Raleigh bottles. They always had Raleigh's signature, name, and sometimes picture. It was quite a deal in our day. And I'm sure you talk to an older person, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. Raleigh products. It's R-A-W-L-E-I-G-H, I believe. This doesn't quite like that, but it's R-A-W. I go to bed at night and I think of so many things after we talk to you now that I could have told you.
Well, are you still intimidated by the microphone?
I don't. If you get that connected up, I'll tear it up.
See, I told you know it's on.
Well, I didn't think I thought you just took notes and was listening to me. Well, anyway.